Why has Generation Z dealt with the most helicopter parenting? That's one big question that's been on my mind when looking into Gen X, because they were the latchkey generation. They were the ones with the most independence, the most freedom. They were the ones that were most able to be themselves without their parents being around. So then why did they then helicopter parent us as Gen Z the most? Let's look into it. The most obvious reason why Gen X parented us in a more helicopter way is that they grew up with a much higher crime rate. So when people look at the past, when people think about the past, they often consider that the kids just kind of roamed around freely. They think that, oh, it was safe back then, it's different now, things are more violent, more criminal now. That's not the case. That's actually very much not true. Violent crime has actually gone down. It's much lower than it was when Gen X were children. When Gen X were children, it was so bad that there were actually pictures of missing children on milk cartons. And when you think about it from that perspective, if you were to grow up and you were pouring milk out of a jug that had a missing kid on it, then you might parent your kids in a different way. You might be a little bit more overbearing if every day or a majority of the days you're looking at a missing child on a milk carton that you're using as, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old. This practice of putting missing children's faces on milk cartons began in the early 1980s during Gen X's early life and went a little further than that. The first known case was Eaton Patz. Now, I probably got that wrong, but he was a 6-year-old boy who disappeared in 1979 in New York. His case gained national attention. The media covered him. It was a big story at the time. And so in 1984, his missing image started appearing on milk cartons. And that was the start of this way to gain attention for missing children. So shortly after this started, a lot of other missing children started coming up, of course, on these milk cartons. Johnny Ghosh was one of them. Again, I'm probably butchering that name. He also appeared on that. And all of these were symbols of this new move toward greater awareness of missing children at that time. However, during the late 1980s and 1990s, this use of children being on milk cartons declined quite a bit until we have today. And that was because of more effective alert systems like Amber Alert and things like that. One more reason I think this is the case is because Gen X waited longer to have kids than baby boomers. Baby boomers had them in their early 20s, whereas Gen X tend to have them in their mid to late 20s. So what does that mean for us? Well, when you have kids later in life, of course, there's less of an opportunity to have more kids. And the more kids you have, just like anything, the less you're going to be very protective of them. Now, for those of us who don't have kids, this might seem like, oh, I would be protective of all of my kids. But in reality, you talk to any parent who has lots of kids, and they tell you that they don't have the ability to watch over their kids intensely. They can't micromanage their kids because they've got 5 of them, because they've got 4 of them. And so in a lot of big families like that, they end up watching each other. They end up helping each other. And there are a lot of pluses to this. There's a lot of pros to this, because there's a lot of interactions that happen between kids that helps them a lot. However, when you don't have that, when you have fewer kids, if you have 1 or 2, what then happens? Well, then you have a lot more ability to watch over them, to watch after them. And the reasons, I think, that we've been parented in a more helicopter fashion, that we've had a little bit more of an overbearing parent style, simply because they could do it, because they had fewer kids and had them later in life. One other reason, though, is because they could. Because technology now allows parents the ability to watch their kids, to track them, to have them on their phone, to text them, to call them. All of these things were not around in Gen X's childhood, and they weren't around in baby boomers. They weren't around for a while. This is a very new technology, and so with that, simply allows the ability to do so. And because they have the ability, what parent doesn't want to know? Okay, their kid is late. Let me give them a call. But if you don't have that ability, then that puts kids in the capacity to take on that challenge. If you are at soccer practice and something goes wrong and you get left behind, well, then you have to figure out a way that you're going to get home. That might seem scary, but if you live in a private neighborhood where it's not really a big deal, then that might be a good challenge that can give kids the capacity to feel confident in themselves. And a lot of Gen Xers, like I talked about in one of my last videos, a lot of them had those experiences where they were on their own and they had to deal with challenges that were difficult and that they were totally unprepared for, and that gave them more confidence. But if your parents are just a phone call away, they're just a text message away, and they actively watch you, right? They can see where you are. They have the Family Finder, the Family 360. Well, then it's a totally different dynamic. So just the ability to watch kids has allowed Gen Xers and allowed our parents to do that. And that then it goes into our next point. According to some books, some surveys, we're actually far more okay with being helicopter parented. What do I mean by that? Well, the practice of, for instance, having your parents track you on your phone, texting with them frequently, calling them, it for one, is far more widespread. Much more people are doing it. Many more parents are engaging in that. And then maybe because so many people are doing it, we are more okay with it. It doesn't bother us as much because so many people around us are doing it. But maybe then again, because we have less confidence than past generations, we appreciate being able to reach out. Maybe the internet, for instance, has given us this interest in wanting rapid results, rapid feedback. And so we can text our parents, we can go back and forth with them really quickly, and that's something that we're used to. And maybe there are certain downsides, but overall, it does seem like a lot of our generation is okay with it. Now, that's why I wanted to ask you guys, is that something that you feel? Do you feel like it's more okay with you, or being able to text your mom, or it's not the end of the world? Maybe she complains a little too much, maybe she's a little annoying about it, but it's not really that big of a deal. Because when you look at past generations, there was far more of a rebellious streak in them. But one surprising thing when reading the book iGen by Jean Twenge was that in many ways, she says, we are far more okay. Gen Z is far more okay with being parented in that way. And that's why I want to open it up to you guys. What do you think? Has that been your experience as well? Because she talks about in the book how, unlike other generations, we are far more okay with more overbearing parenting. Now, I know that might be a bit of a negative term, but on the opposite end, it could also be seen as more responsive, a parent who's more involved. And maybe part of it is rapid feedback. Now, a lot of this is my own speculation. I'm going to be honest with you about that. And that is, I'm not exactly sure that this is true. I'm not exactly sure, and that's why I was asking you before. And I really would like to know your experience and how you think about things, because I'm not exactly sure that this is entirely the truth, that we are more okay with it. But if we were, some possible reasons might be because we like more rapid feedback. We're used to the internet. We're used to being able to text people, being able to follow up quickly, being able to ask, at this point, ask ChatGPT what we want and have it curate exactly what we want back. So maybe part of it is we like having a relationship with our parents that is more direct, that isn't so hands-off, that isn't so removed from us. And while the downside might be overbearing, the opposite side might be parents who genuinely care and are really involved in our lives and are there to actually help us. And maybe part of it is we're looking at it in a negative way. Maybe we're looking at it as more helicopter parenting. And the downside of that, of course, is we're less confident, less able to deal with challenges because we haven't had to deal with them on our own. But maybe the opposite is a closer family structure. Maybe we are closer with our families. If this is the case, maybe part of it is a positive just as much as it is a negative. Maybe part of it is just as much a strength as it is a weakness. Maybe on one side it's overbearing, but on another side it's more involved, more interested in our lives. And that is one of the things she talks about. She talks about how families are closer. And you can even see this in particular with the amount of time that parents have spent with their kids actually has gone up quite a bit from what it used to be. It used to be that they wouldn't spend nearly as much time with their kids because they had other involvements, because they had work, but that time has steadily gone up over the years. And us being the most recent generation, because Alpha isn't finished yet, maybe we're dealing with the pluses and minuses of that. And like I said, maybe the twist of this whole concept is that other generations are looking at us and comparing us to who they are. They're comparing us with how they grew up and who they are based upon their parents, because they had parents who weren't as involved, who weren't as interested in their lives. They think that we should be the same, and they see our lives as different, as lesser because of that difference. And maybe it's just as much a strength. as it is a weakness. So those are some of the reasons why I think Gen X might have helicopter parented us more than others. But I really want to know your thoughts, because I know this might seem like a cliche, but one of the aspects of my channel that I want to make a little bit unique is I want to start making videos that are more audience-based, that come from you guys, because I do really want to understand not just the overall of Gen Z, the statistics and the studies and all that, but more of the day-to-day experiences of what we've actually gone through. So comment below on what you think about these thoughts, especially on my last point on whether we actually are helicopter parented or whether that's a good and bad thing. So thanks for looking into it, and I'll see you in the next one.